Let's end our discussion with this section on how we can use a graphing calculator. What I would expect you to be able to do at this point is to use your calculator to graph a function, to evaluate a function, and also to find the domain of a function. So I want to look at two of the functions that we've discussed earlier, like that f of x is equal to the square root of x squared minus 4x, and then f of x is equal to x minus 5 over the square root of x minus 7. So on your graphing calculator, I have already entered this first function, the square root of x squared minus 4x. And I'm going to graph this in the standard viewing window. So if I go to zoom in 6, I get the standard window. So this graph confirms that my domain is values from 4 to infinity and also from negative infinity to 0. This is one of the key things I think about using your graphing calculator, is that you can use it to confirm the domain. And the domain, we always read the graph from left to right and think about what piece of the graph, in other words, what values of x is there a piece of the graph. So if I go from left to right, my graph is visible between values from negative infinity to 0, and then it is not visible between the 0 and the 4, but then it picks up from 4 to infinity. So that's how I would graph it. Now to evaluate the function, I can do that several ways on the calculator. I can press trace, and I can type in a value for x if I want to evaluate it. So we know that it's have to think about a value that's in the domain. So if I want to evaluate it at 6 and press enter, it takes me to the point on the graph, as well as it displays what the output value is at that particular input. I can also do second graph and look at the table. Ooh, my table's out of whack. Let me change that a bit. If I do second window, I can change my table to begin at 0, and the increment in my table can be 1 unit. So let me go back to look at those a little bit better. Okay, so this also confirms that I have values that are not in the domain because of that error message. But there you can see my input and my output. Okay. Now what if I wanted to graph the second one? So I would have to enter in parentheses x minus 5, close parentheses, and then divided by, open up the square root, so second x squared, and inside that is x minus 7. And then I close parentheses. Okay, and if you recall, we found the domain for that to be 7 and larger. Well, actually not including 7, so just larger than 7. So if we graph, we can see that the graph is not visible until we get to values of x that are greater than 7. I can also confirm that by my table. You see that I have an error message for everything that is 7 and below, and so I can evaluate it by looking at my table, or again by using that trace key and entering the value of x and I need to evaluate. You can certainly use the main window, right? If I wanted to evaluate this function for, let's say, 10, I could type in, just like I would if I was solving this by hand, 10 minus 5, close parentheses, divided by square root of 10 minus 7, and close parentheses, and I would also get the evaluation in that way. Okay, so that concludes this first section. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions. Thanks.